friends, I'm Erin, and this is Erin Go Live. This is a mental health video. It's Mental Health May, and I specifically want to make this video to help end the stigma, because the stigma of mental illness, of any sort of trouble with mental health, certainly kind of kept me in the mental health closet for too long, which means that I didn't get the help that I needed until not too late, but I could have received treatment and therefore felt better, been doing much better, much sooner than I did. Where that stigma really came from for me is that my maternal grandmother had paranoid schizophrenia and she was bipolar. They called it manic depressive at that time. And my mom and her siblings really lived a very traumatic childhood as a result. When you can't trust your mom, where she can't be the ultimate source of comfort and safety, and in fact you fear the things that your mom might do, particularly when she's not on her meds. That is not a safe, supportive way to grow up, and that's not a way to raise emotionally secure and mentally stable people, right? Because there's no foundation there when you literally are afraid of mom. And so I grew up knowing this. My grandmother passed when I was almost 4 years old. I do have a couple memories of her. I have one kind of, very positive memory about regarding cookies. And then I have one kind of negative memory about her snapping at me over something that made no sense. And I was like 3 at the time. But mostly I have what I hear from my mom and my aunt. And so I grew up with kind of being crazy as in going to the loony bin as this kind of like joke. But it was like that sick joke in the family that was really seated in fear and pain. And so I grew up my whole life afraid that I was going to end up mentally ill in some way. I was afraid to have kids because in my mind, even though, if you are going to develop paranoid schizophrenia, I believe 27 is kind of the cutoff date for when that would happen, between your teens and your early 20s. And in my mind, though, as a kid, I just knew the timing of my grandmother having babies and then becoming mentally ill. And so I just kind of associated with like the hormone changes of getting pregnant. And so I had a real fear of getting pregnant when I was younger, ever getting pregnant, because I was afraid it was going to cause paranoid schizophrenia in me, because I associated that with my grandmother. So when I started displaying some mental health related issues, I was really in denial about them. Therefore, I didn't get the help that I needed. So in order to keep this from being like the story of my life, this is not what this is meant to be, I'm just going to tell you some of the basics of the things that I have experienced and where I am now in terms of my mental health life and status. So looking back now, it is clear that I had some anxiety issues really crop up in high school at around 15 years old. I started having anxiety that was manifesting itself physically in not being able to keep food down. And by the time I was 17, I got down to 92 pounds. I'm 5'1", got down to 92 pounds. I would be hungry. I would go to eat. And within taking the first couple bites, I would feel like I was going to be sick. And so either I would just stop eating, so this just not take in very many calories to begin with, or I would keep trying to eat and then would end up getting sick, and then I would lose a great many of the calories that I had just ingested. So I got, very sickly thin. Fortunately, it never became like a significant health concern. My doctors were certainly watching and paying attention. It was not an eating disorder. We later found out it was anxiety related. Did I get treatment for anxiety though? No. What happened is just the period of time that was causing anxiety in my life. I used to be a very type A kind of person. I've gotten over that. But that seemed to be driving. And once this kind of period was over, it went away. The only other time that really cropped up was after my husband was injured in Iraq. The first 2 weeks or so, I lost like 10 pounds really quick because I just couldn't keep anything down. That same kind of overactive gag reflex came back, but that was a very specific circumstance. And so, and it seemed, it went away kind of on its own without receiving any treatment. But there's this kind of like background something happening. when I went back to college, I never grew up with any learning disabilities or diagnoses or anything like that. But when I went back to college as an adult, I transferred to Sac State as a junior when I was 25 or 26. I was really demonstrating some ADHD kind of behaviors, really hard time focusing, concentrating for long periods of time. I would actually use like a fidget toy. I used to keep a tennis ball, keep it in the side pocket of my backpack, and I would just, that physical movement helped me to concentrate. And professors would recognize this. The first time someone ever like diagnosed me with ADHD was actually one of my professors. And I always thought like maybe this had happened. I'd had some concussions, and the last concussion I had, I was like 19, and I thought maybe that like last concussion kind of rattled some things around and caused maybe some like post-concussive ADHD or something like that. So that was kind of this other symptom that was kind of going on in the background. Over the years after Sam was injured, the anxiety would crop back up. And there was a lot of, I was suggested that I went to therapy multiple times, but I was strong. I didn't need that. I was in denial about what I actually needed and about how much pressure I was under and how much it was actually affecting me. And then other people really started to notice, and especially during times when I wasn't super busy, I was starting to kind of fall apart a little bit. I was starting to have anxiety attacks in a car. And there was nothing specifically about the car that I had anxiety over. I'm not sure why still that these would happen in the car, but I wouldn't feel the anxiety. What I would feel was the symptoms of hyperventilation. It's called carpal pedal spasms. And basically I'd start to have like a tingling in my fingers, and then it would go on to like its full manifestation is almost like someone who has cerebral palsy and has extreme tone, and like just everything flexes in like this, and I can't relax, can hardly move. I would feel tingling and everything, like in my lips, cheeks, nose, whatever, sometimes even my thighs. And basically it's a buildup of carbon dioxide, because when you're hyperventilating, you keep inhaling in and you're not exhaling out enough. And so the balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide gets wonky. And I would feel that. I wouldn't feel what I was actually anxious about. I would feel these panic attacks, or I would feel the hyperventilation, but I didn't know what was behind this. So it was that coupled with some depression that I could no longer kind of ignore, that I finally got into therapy, started seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist, and this happened to be right before Sam got hurt. Literally like 3 weeks before Sam died. Literally like 3 weeks before Sam died. So grief certainly came in and murkied the waters quite a bit, because there were definitely some underlying issues, and including some unresolved grief from the original injury. And then we had the acute grief that had to be dealt with, and there was just so much numbness that happened. And honestly, I was just telling a friend yesterday that I don't feel like I've been truly myself, felt like truly myself, until like just this past December, January. Like I was numb for that long, almost 3 full years after Sam died. And like, on the one hand, it feels like an enormous amount of time has gone by. In another, I just think like, what happened in the last 3 years? Like, it just seems like no time at all either. And I can't believe it's actually been 3 years. So one thing that had cropped up in the last year or so in particular, related to my anxiety, but not exclusively anxiety, was these kind of super hyperactive moments or days. I definitely have had these in the past where there would just be a day where I felt like I was having like a sugar rush all day long. But they were getting to the point that it was actually like physically uncomfortable, and I was feeling anxiety over the fact that I felt so good. And I think because I had gone through such a period of numbness and kind of low level depression, that all of a sudden I would have this day where I had just boundless energy and like feeling on top of the world, bouncing off the walls kind of feeling. And it was just kind of disconcerting. I would even take Valium to like chill myself out. Not Valium. I would even take a Xanax sometimes just to like chill myself out because I was uncomfortable feeling so good. So this kept happening, and more recently, kind of been able to time it out and piece it apart a little bit better to where there would be a 3 or 4 day stint where I wasn't sleeping very well, only a few hours, maybe 3 to 5 hours of sleep a night. But instead of feeling terrible and kind of hungover the next day, once I get like a cup of coffee and a glass of water in me in the morning, I'm good to go, rather than just feeling terrible. And then this just like invincible on top of the world kind of feeling is kind of manic, right? And then these would always be kind of followed by, not immediately, but typically followed by a period of depression. And so I seem to be cycling through these periods, like these very high points and then these very low points. The high points would last 2 to 4 days. The low points, typically 2 to 4 weeks. And then maybe I have some kind of like normal time in between. But always kind of like this feeling of waiting for the other shoe to drop. So long story short, one day I'd gone into my psychiatrist's office for just like our regular check-ins. And she's like, have you had more caffeine than normal today? I was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Like just talking a mile a minute. And she's like, okay, you seem like really hyper. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. I feel great. Like all this. And so that kind of got her wheels turning. And then based on the behaviors I'd been describing, the pattern of behavior I'd been describing, and essentially I have now been diagnosed with cyclothymia. So cyclothymia is kind of a way toned down version of bipolar. And there's these bipolar bouts of time. With cyclothymia, though, you cycle through them much more quickly. So rather than being manic for weeks at a time or even months at a time, it is literally only days at a time. A couple days, 3, 4 days. Don't need a lot of sleep during that time, but you also aren't making as life disruptive. You're not going out and spending, wild amounts of money or exhibiting high risk behavior. It's much less destructive towards your life than someone who, particularly with bipolar 1, would be. And then the depression side of things as well. And one thing that really kind of illustrates, I think, that this is a true diagnosis is the fact that since I've started this mood stabilizer, I'm not going to get into the specifics of what my medication is because it's going to be individual for each person, and I'm not here to give medical advice. If you feel like you're exhibiting any of these symptoms, go seek out a psychiatrist, a therapist, a mental health professional to help you with that. I did start, though, about 6 to 8 weeks ago on a mood stabilizer used for the purpose of bipolar disorder. And my moods have mellowed out quite a bit. So like if you imagine, like these highs and lows, it's like we've chopped off the ends of the highs and lows, and my mood is much more kind of in the middle. I can feel up, I can feel down, but it's not way up and it's not way down, right? And that kind of it feels much better because whenever I feel good, when I was feeling good before, I was like just question it, like, do I actually feel good, or is this just a symptom of my mental illness? And then when I'm feeling good, it's like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it's like, okay, when am I gonna be depressed now? So one thing I think it's really important, one is to talk about it, talk with your friends, talk about my sister was the one that got me to talk to our doctor in the first place. We have the same general practitioner, and she was seeing what I was going through, and she was like, I think you should talk to her, tell her what you're going through. She'll try you on, probably start you on the same med she started me on. And I, feel so much better, and I'm so glad that I did it. Start there. And so it started with a conversation and a kind of validation of what I was feeling, and also this feeling that it was okay that I was feeling that, and that I was asking for help. Another big part of this that has to be acknowledged is lifestyle and agency. When you have a mental illness, particularly depression, speaking from my own experience here, doing things that will improve your mental health can be very difficult. We all know we typically feel better after we've taken a shower and get dressed, right? But when you are depressed, getting into the shower can feel like the most daunting of tasks. Like, I'd rather run a marathon than go take a shower on some days. So with that information, I think there's I think it's important to both be medicated if you need medication, and that's something to talk to your mental health, your provider about, and make sure that you are engaging in activities that help you feel good and not engaging in activities that, cause you to not feel good. And I think that's a really good, that's the really good balance between having a psychiatrist and a therapist, because the therapist is there to help you with the actual behavioral side of things. Identifying what we call my yellow lights. We have this green light, yellow light, red light kind of system. The green lights are when everything is going really well. For me, when I start to see yellow light behavior, or you might call them red flags, that's when I know those are the lifestyle pieces that I'm like, oh, okay, I canceled on my friends. I want to take naps even though I got a perfectly good night of sleep last night. I am, wanting to skip a workout or not go outside and go for a walk. I just want to be on the couch under a blanket. When I start seeing these types of behaviors in myself, I know that there's a slippery slope that I'm about to careen down if I don't get this under control. Making sure I'm taking meds. For me personally, making sure I'm taking my meds, making sure that I am being active, making sure that I am eating good quality food, and especially that I'm engaging in social activities, which includes getting outside and being active with my body. Those are really big, important factors for me. So I think I have seen a tremendous benefit, one, in being on appropriate medications, and two, not using the excuse of I have a mental illness, therefore I can't be held responsible for my behaviors. We do have agency, and there is some responsibility that we need to take in order to do these lifestyle things that we know will make us feel better. But a lot of times that's only possible because of the medication that we're on, right? So they go hand in hand. So I don't know where I'm really going with this video other than just to share my experience, to hope that, by talking about it, we can make it be a little bit more normal, something that we do talk about and something that we're not ashamed of. So if you have any thoughts, please share them with me. And my sign off, which has kind of become a new life philosophy, came about on the heels of a 2-3 week long depression. And so it's important to recognize that we only see the light because of the dark. We only get the rainbow after the storm. Remember, every day is a great day for a great day, all day.